of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District, and today is Thursday, September the 12th, and we'll be starting our meeting, a regular board meeting tonight at 6:30. Troy, could we do a roll call vote, please?
Manager Lowe. Manager Anderson. Present. Manager Baki.
I am here.
Manager Taves. President Schmaltz.
Here. So we do have a quorum. Thank you. Setting of the meeting agenda. We already have, I guess it's just work off the paper copy, even though we added some things. The meeting agenda stands as it is. Are there any additions or corrections to the meeting agenda that's already not published here?
We added the
Did
opposite.
not get added. The signed lease did not get added.
I added verbiage to the memo.
Oh, perfect.
It's the same,
Oh, okay,
right,
perfect.
so
Sounds good.
it's the same topic, so.
So that's the published agenda. Are there any changes or additions or corrections? Okay, hearing then, I'd like to hear a motion to accept the agenda as published.
So moved.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Troy, can we do a roll call vote?
We need a second. We need a second. Second.
Oh, yeah.
I will second. I will second.
Yeah, thank you, Manager Rocky.
Manager Lowe. Manager Anderson. Aye. Manager Baki.
Aye.
Manager Taves. I saw him join.
Doug, you're muted.
President Schmaltz.
Aye. So the motion carries then. Moving on to new business, the first topic is the East Metro Water Resources Education Program contract.
To bring this to the table, I'm gonna make a motion that we not sign this contract this year, and for the next 3 years. Although we could change it, I suppose. So just to, but the motion is not to approve.
Okay, so is there a second to the motion so we can encourage discussion, or if there's no second, then we could entertain another motion if someone has one. Is there a second to Manager Anderson's motion?
I will second that motion.
Okay, thank you, Manager Baki. So we can have discussion and comments. Appears to me that they're gonna go with the 24,500, which is a two-person effort, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
My big complaint again is, as I mentioned before, is that we've been trying to figure out how this formula worked. And finally, last year, I was added to the subcommittee. And we had several meetings this year. I think it was at least 2. There might have been a third one initially as well, but at least 2 thorough meetings this year talking about this. And the foundation of it was the MS4 programs that were coming down from the federal government to the cities to take care of stormwater. And this was probably 15 years ago, I think. And then it worked down from the biggest cities to the $10,000 or $20,000 or 1,000 population cities. And it's just been going down to the cities in that format. One of the things that's really changed is that it started out with 8 watershed districts. And those were the watershed districts primarily in Washington County, and then us, of course, added. The membership has grown to 33 entities. And the burden is still being shouldered by those 8 watershed districts. And the information has been helpful up to this point. It's been affordable up to this point, but it's general in nature. And so we've never really gotten that focus on us, and what we've done, what we've accomplished, like we were hoping. You know, when you're servicing that many, clients, of course, you're not going to be able to get that type of individual service. So I think that it has served its purpose for us. We also have a membership through the Lower St. Croix. Our counties are contributing now to this. But when you look at the city listing from that information I gave at a prior meeting, the largest cities are paying, I think it's 4,000 or 5,000 per city. And then the small ones are paying just a little bit over 1,000 each. And so we're supporting all of that activity in those areas. The MS4 in our particular district is handled by the cities. And so, you know, we don't have anything to do with that. So that's my rationale. It hasn't changed. I just think that we could spend that 30,000 getting our own public relation marketing company working for us and telling our story.
It says 24,500 here.
Yeah.
So-
No, I'm saying we could use, what did I say, 30? Yeah, 24,000, yeah.
President Schmaltz.
Yes, go ahead, Manager Baki.
Yeah, my understanding is the benefit we have from this contract is an educational program. And we are, or have developed our own educational program in-house. Are there other benefits that we should be aware of through this contract?
Well, one thing that I think has been good for us is that, at least in the Forest Lake Times, Angie, you got an article in almost every issue during the season times. So this year it was a little less because she's been busy with her book and everything else, but that's been a very good coverage of what was happening in terms of, you know, water quality, water issues that is relate to us, but not directly tied to us. And that's been an issue with us and not getting correct recognition. But it still gets exposure to the people and helps educate the people. So I think we're probably not going to get that anymore. Maybe we will. I don't know.
Well,
But-
you know, at one time I had proposed that, is that we do our own column in the paper on a weekly basis. And Angie's columns, like you were saying, they're more general. They attribute everything that's in the articles to Washington Conservation Service. That's where the office is.
Right.
So it's always their phone number, or their address. And Angie's a good writer. I've never complained about that. She's an excellent writer. But she's not focused. She's got a much broader focus, and now it's even broader than it was in the past. And we can get some really targeted articles of our own in the paper on a regular basis if we commit to it. And we can use that budget money to do that.
Mr. President,
Yes, Doug, go ahead.
the question to Mike, do we have the bandwidth in our staff to be able to kind of compensate for this if we drop this contract? You know, we may not be getting as much as we had hoped for out of this current arrangement, but could we step up and get articles into the papers and video pieces out there to support the kind of programs we're pushing?
Mr. President, Andrew Taves, I guess, and board members, so kind of a long-standing thing. So the Cumberland Forest Lake Watershed District has, you know, long had a educational outreach program of some variety of doing support where others have not contributed from a watershed district. You know, a lot of them have relied almost basically entirely on MREP to do all that work for them, including workshops, flyers, you know, any of those pieces. So, so we do have somebody on staff right now that's a seasonal, that's interested in maybe staying on, that is a very good writer, used to write for somebody else, one of the local papers. But the other is that, you know, we're doing a lot of workshops with Adam that is a benefit to the larger community, but we don't get any credit towards the program, so. So I don't think it's as much about just that, but you know, there's, the taxpayers for Forest Lake under this structure also, as I've, you know, mentioned before, pay through 4 different mechanisms. The watershed, the city, Washington County, and then the Lower St. Clair. While others are contributing through 1 or 2, so. I don't think anybody's had an issue with the partnership, again. You know, certainly agreement on, I think at the staff level and the board about the quality of the writing that Angie does. It has been quite generic, and it's focused, there's been more effort to do some specific articles for the district. But, so it's really about what the board would want. We did budget roughly half that, the dollar amount for 2025. But it's, you know, there's just, that part of really the district putting forth a lot of effort and a lot of financial resources. Again, where we have where we are rich in water resources, right? Wetlands, floodplains, lakes, but we don't have the tax capacity, so. You know, and there's no mechanism within the funding structure to recognize that, so it's really an undue burden for a lot of the taxpayers in terms of a prorated piece, so. To your question, you know, I think we could do it, and either it's gonna be staff or some contracted work, as Manager Anderson has suggested. So,
We're still gonna get the exposure of the programs they do in our area and so forth. They put those clinics on it. And Adam's actually putting on additional clinics, right? On his own. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, that's.
Yeah.
what I
right,
was
for the
thinking.
district, I mean, but we don't do a poll at the door and say, are you from Cumberland?
No, no.
You know, so people are coming from all over the place, and some of the workshops, just by the nature of the facilities, are being done outside of the district boundaries, so, you know, it's a convenience part, but also it's just understanding the greater good and trying to, you know, get that word out about all the different work.
Right.
So I think there's, you know, a couple different elements, you know, the other was, you know, there's revenue coming in from, the TikTok accounts and stuff like that to the MRAP program that we don't have, sight of, you know, we're not, I think there's been some discussion about that.
Does that go to the WCD?
Well, it's split between, is my understanding from the original, limited piece, there was like 2 sentences in one of the minutes once, but half of it goes to WCD and half is retained by Angie as a private individual, so,
So none of it goes to reducing the total cost of the program.
right, which I would think it would be,
So
so.
do I think that's pretty.
Right, then
cool.
And I think I've communicated to the board that I think that if some members of the public, and we have some locally, found out that we're contributing to a program that's paying for somebody's time to develop content and then benefiting privately from that, I think that would be another sort of egg on the district's face, if you will. Because of the unusual nature of it. I just think, you know, we would want to be forthright in that regard, but that's their decision. And it's likewise from the board to decide if that's a component of what they would want to consider in this decision as well.
Just to add, to what Mike said, that's not just Washington County's scenario. It's also applicable in Chisago. Because Wyoming's we're
Right.
paying for the county and so forth, so.
Right, in more recent years now, right, because now that Chisago County is paying due to the
Right.
partnership to the Lower St. Croix, right, it's the city of Wyoming residents would be
Yeah.
under the same framework,
Mhm.
yeah.
I think a lot of those are good arguments. The thing that bothers me a little bit is that this is kind of a team effort. If we drop out, then somebody else is gonna have to pick up the difference, I suspect. Which may cause some issues, so, so is there, we do get some value from it. I think everybody would agree to that. Is there another option that we can look at it, perhaps not paying the full 24,000, but saying this is worth X thousand to us? And we'll offer that this year, looking to get this whole thing reevaluated the following year, as far as maybe working these TikTok funds back in to reduce the.
But that's not gonna be enough to make a difference. It's the formula that they're using. And the formula is based on tax capacity for only the watershed districts. So they look at the tax capacity, you know, estimated market value, taxable value, and that's why we're number 3, our taxable value, because we have so much commercial property in Washington County within our district boundary. It all flows to Comfort Lake. I mean, very little of it stays here, and then a little bit goes to Rice Creek, but very small amount goes into Forest Lake. So that's really what wasn't fair. When we talked about it here over the years, you know, we were trying to figure out why are we up there at number 3 when we're one of the smallest districts, and that's why. Because we've had a lot of building, we've had especially a lot of commercial expansion in Forest Lake. There was hardly anything on Broadway, you know, in '87 when we moved here. It was just wetlands. So all of that has added to that tax capacity, and we're paying way more than we should. They weren't willing to look at alternative formulas so that it was more equalized, you know, through the counties and the big cities, especially in particular. Those cities coming on board are getting pretty much a free ride, as far as I'm concerned. And we shouldn't be paying for that.
Mr. President?
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, Manager Taves.
Yeah, question for Manager Anderson. If we were to drop out for 1 year, would that possibly precipitate a conversation about reevaluating that formula?
Well, I would hope so. I would hope so. I can't guarantee it, but I would hope so. But I think we need to worry about what's best for us and not worry about MRAP. They
True,
have
true.
methods that they can make up that differential. The services that we're getting are not to our best advantage. When we had one person and starting out, one, you know, administrator, that was our entire employee base. But over the years, of course, we've built up our staff so that we could offer these things that we're required to do. Outreach and education is one of them. And so we're doing a good job of that within our own boundaries. So we don't need MRAP anymore. Personally, I don't believe we've got technicians that are qualified to do the work. But if we do need MRAP, we can access it through these other avenues. Both of our counties pay into MRAP. The Lower St. Croix it's a partnership. Lower St. Croix does not charge anything for us to do that, but it's available through the partnership. So we're covered as far as that, having access to what they're doing. If it's something very innovative and different than what we've done, then we can always, you know, it's a public document, we can always use it.
Mike, go ahead.
Mr. President, managers, so the request is that the contract be signed by the latter part of second half of November or so.
November 27th.
Right, so there is some time.
Well, you know, we're gonna get a call.
Right, so, well,
So-
and that's a, you know, one of your question about are there other options, I mean, one, you know, we did budget a dollar amount, but not the full amount, so, that's something for the board to consider, and then maybe, you know, because the AMREP would certainly look very different if all the watershed districts kind of took the same advantage or same tack, if you will. However, the population core has always been in the Woodbury, you know, Oakdale area, and that's where a lot of time has been spent doing workshops or other activity, which makes sense. But the you know, the formula piece doesn't necessarily reflect the high, you know, cost, I guess, really to the taxpayers locally to deal with all the water resource challenges that we have. So, you know, if we had the same low, and the board saw the numbers in the budget process, you know, what the others are, charging per 100,000 of value, then it's a different piece, but that's not how the formula, you know, was necessarily created, so,
It's a set amount for the cities
right.
and it's way too low. But anyway, you know, the point being, if we've got until November, we can table this and think about it some more. But I know I'm not gonna change my mind on this. It's just, we've got to look at, you know, we budgeted for our general fund. And it's a little over 1.8 million. $1 million of that is for our overhead and our staff. And the benefits and taxes that go along with that. And we've got 500,000 that we're paying back every year now for the next several years on the loans that we took from the MPCA, the low interest or no interest loans, which was very deliberate. We understood it. Now it's time to start paying those back. And that's going to leave us roughly about $300,000 if everything goes exactly how we budgeted. So let's just say somewhere between 250 and 300,000 that we have left. And we have the 10% matches on programs that we've already got grants for. So I don't know what that 10% is going to end up being, but it's going to be somewhere north of 100,000, I'm pretty sure. So when I look at spending, give me the number again, $24,000 on a program that does not deliver for us everything that we need. Yes, they do good jobs and, you know, blah, 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 but we're doing all of that now. You know, we're teaching people in our own boundary about clean water and what it takes to get there and what they need to be doing. So we're taking care of all of that. And I'd rather see the money going to a very direct, targeted program for our people.
Any other comments or questions? And we have a motion on the floor which says basically that we either vote no on it, basically, right? No doubt.
That was the motion.
Right. So if you feel that's what you'd like to do, that's the way you vote. If you feel that there's an option here to do something differently and put some money in the pot, but maybe not bail out entirely. Still sends a message, but then I would vote down this so we could have another discussion.
Can I
yes.
offer another option?
Yes, certainly. Madam
Is
Chair.
that if we want to table this until a future time, we can either do what you say, vote the motion down, or I can withdraw.
Well, how does the board feel? Has everybody kind of made a decision
President
on this?
Schmaltz,
Yes, go ahead, Manager Bucky.
I say, let's vote. Let's vote.
Okay.
To be clear, what are we voting? How does
We're gonna-
the language is
motion
gonna be
says
critical
that
here.
we're not gonna participate in this year's NREP program, which would have cost us $24,500. So they will get $0 from us for 2025.
One point of clarification is that it is a 3-year contract. This is a 3-year contract.
So
So it's not, it's annually, you know, we pay 24,500 annually,
Annually,
right?
correct.
So actually, we're committing to $75,000 over the next 3 years. Which even reinforces Manager Anderson's argument more because we can utilize our staff person if we have extra money in that respect.
Or a contract.
Or a contract. Any other questions? Okay, then,
Hey, President Schmaltz,
yes, is that Chris? Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
this is Chris.
Yeah, go ahead.
The formulas are good for the following 3 years. Do they change every 3 years, I guess? Is that that's my question.
No,
So the way that they calculate our our amount will never change.
Yes,
Is
this
there a
this is different than the previous years, in the
Okay.
previous 3-year contract, this is.
Okay, so there is a rider in the doc, and I think I read that too, that there is a escalation every year based on market values. Yeah,
Right, each year, but in 3 years, the committee will get together again and make another decision.
mhm. I think that was just inflation. I have to look at that. Can you pull up?
But
that
does the
one?
way that they calculate it will always be the same? It just depends on whether it's, there's an adder to it or not?
No, Manager Anderson shared with me at least one that had 3 different funding scenarios, that was reviewed, and then they landed on this one.
Okay,
Which isn't, it's not different from what we've always had. That's the point.
Oh, okay,
They came back to home,
all right.
you know, there wasn't an appetite to drastically change things.
I'm just not sure how they came up with the CFLWD.
Well,
I think he doubled our tax capacity, I mean, just looking at this now. I have no idea how they came up with, that's,
oh, I was talking about the contract.
right, but I mean, the dollar amount and in the formula seems to be an error.
Well, if we say yes, we can work with them on correcting anything like that, but, the language that you just brought up from the contract itself. I remember there being an inflation rider every year. And that would be the CPI. We're not talking about changing market values. Although market values, if they recalculate that every year, then we're paying more every year. So that's a good question. I honestly, without the contract in front of me, I can't address that. Can you, Chuck? Do you have it?
No, I don't have the contract, Manager
You
Anderson.
don't? Okay, all right, thank you. Sorry.
Yep, and so maybe we should get Adam Gelman as well. He's indicating that the WCD will provide up to a $16,172 in-kind match in the program. I was not aware of that.
Who will do that?
The WCD, that they're encouraging existing educational staff for in-kind matches. So. Is that in the contract? Adam?
Mr. President, managers, I think what Manager Anderson's referring to, there is a line in there that says the annual inflation adjustment of 4% will be added to year 2 and 3, right? Yeah. And then in-kind matches from existing educational staff from organizations is encouraged. And the Washington County District, Conservation District is providing 16,000 of in-kind match. So year 2 and 3 will go up 4% is my understanding, adjusting for inflation.
All right, good. So there's no calculation in the contract to go back to the market value, correct?
That is my understanding, yep.
The tax capacity. Thank you. That's what I thought.
Okay, any other questions? Chris, did that answer your question? Yes,
it
it
does,
did.
it does. Sorry, I was struggling with the mute button. Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So then, we ready for a roll call vote? Okay,
We're gonna say something.
any other questions, comments or questions? Hey, not, go ahead, Tori.
Manager Lowe,
I just wanted to clarify, an aye vote is to vote down the contract.
That's correct.
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye. So the motion carries, which means that we will be not participating in the NREP program.
Correct.
I would suggest that staff or who, I took some notes here, but we should line up our reasons for why we've decided what we're gonna do in here, so we have everybody has the same copy, because I'm sure we'll have some follow-up on this before November 27th.
Yeah.
And we all should be aligned with how we come to this decision.
Sure, it's all on tape, so if we can just get those reasons typed, that would be great.
Well, what I had written down, let me just, can I give you that sheet?
You know, I'll just have the,
Oh, here it is, I got it. I had 4 reasons. One is, the question about the, controversy over the TikTok funds. That our taxpayers are paying in 4 different ways. We have a full-time staff now, and more than that, for doing more locally focused work, which is what our needs are right now, based upon our size and the issues we have to deal with in terms of outreach. And basically, we have a smaller tax base, don't we? Is that the other?
No,
third one?
no. Which is, it's all on tape, let
Okay,
her
all
just type everything up and we'll all get a copy of it.
And go from there.
And yeah, because it's all rational.
Okay, moving on then to the next topic, which would be item B, new business, which is the office lease option.
Mr. President, managers, I think we have, a guest here this evening. Manager Anderson and Manager Baki have been working on the lease, so there's 2 pieces here. One is a discussion about the lease extension, and then the other is about, just a conversation with the board about a potential, future building option. So, and a structure for that.
Do you want to address the current buildings contract?
That might be the easiest piece first.
All right,
So I sent out earlier, the contract has been reviewed by council
Mhm.
and Manager Anderson and Manager Baki. So
Okay.
it's fairly straightforward.
Yeah, President Schmaltz, you want me to introduce?
Yes, yeah, go ahead, manager. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, we got the signed lease back, finally, a few days ago, and, I had looked through it. I didn't look through it carefully enough, obviously, because Chuck did find a couple of things, and I'm gonna turn that over to Chuck. I don't think it's gonna be a problem. There's nothing new. It's just, there's one, I think probably a mistake, that was an overlook on an issue, but I'm gonna turn it over to Chuck. And Chuck, if you would please, review with the board what your findings are on the contract. Lease.
Yes, thank you, Manager Anderson, Mr. Chair, board members. Also, I'll note that Scott Cragness is on the phone connection here. He's the owner's representative. My comment is limited. I had recommended several edits back a month or 2 ago, and they were all incorporated except for part of one. And it's simply that the original lease had referred, had language characterizing the lease as what's known as an NNN lease, triple net lease, which is a shorthand way of certain types of leases defining the relationship between the tenant and the landlord. And in fact, if you read the terms of this lease, it's not an NNN lease. And I had asked that those references to NNN simply be deleted. And there was one on page 1 that was deleted, but then there's another provision on page 2 where that is still in the lease. And so I'm simply recommending that you, if you approve the lease extension, you do so with the condition that we make that edit. And I would think that the owners would be fine with that. I think it was just an oversight. My only other recommendation is that if you do approve the extension, that you authorize the administrator to sign it. And that's for a very practical reason, that it would allow for electronic signature of the lease, whereas the board doesn't have authority to use electronic signature at this point.
Is that it, Chuck?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. That's why we have lawyers. to
See, I just had a
verify
couple
details.
questions. One is, I'm just thinking of the timing on this is a 3-year lease starting in January 25th. It took a while to get this signed. We had signed an earlier lease that was for 3 years. So are we actually changing the timing of this lease or not?
The,
Of the old lease
Well, it
we were
would-
in and
it would,
signed.
it would change by about, 3.5 months. Cause
That's
yeah, that's all. Our lease expires this December,
Oh,
our old lease. And so we were working on this a year in advance. And so we were all, I think, getting nervous in first quarter this year. But I confirmed with Scott that our lease is actually ends this year. And so we've been ahead of the game there. So the date would change based on the signing of this new lease.
okay. The other question I had is how, we got incorporated here as a kind of a payback on any deferred taxes that we get because we're
Yes.
LGU. So do you have any idea what that is? What tax?
I brought it up to the owners because, when you are a government agency, you don't, and you have a building, you don't pay taxes.
But how
and
many
so-
dollars is it? I'm just
Well, I
kinda
don't know
curious.
yet. I mean, we haven't seen the final. The application has to be made by the building owner.
Okay,
And so that, I think I sent a sample form to them, gave them the contact information at Washington County. And I know that Scott could probably address this better, but I know that is in process and they were expecting a resolution sometime soon.
but that tax is part of the CAM, when we've been paying the CAM for like 6 years, 7 years.
Yeah.
So anybody know how much?
Well, the
10 years.
10 years,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, well, the idea is to obviously get that
Right.
offsetting that part of the CAM.
Okay.
So the mechanics of that still have to be worked out. Can I ask Scott to address this right now?
Sure.
Or, hey, Scott,
Yeah,
are you on?
yes,
Okay,
can you hear me?
Can't see you. Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. Thanks for having me, everybody.
That's great that you could make it. Did you hear the discussion on the property tax forgiveness?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
And, the process has started with that, and what we would do, they don't do anything retroactively for fiscal year, or for the calendar year 2024, but we are working on that for 2025.
Okay.
It's
And how many
it's a
dollars
tedious
is that?
process. We do not know yet.
Well, it's
Well,
only
it's
for a
gonna-
portion of the building.
Yeah, it's gonna be.
It's a
prorated
portion,
out.
exactly. It's a mathematical calculation the county needs to get on board with that basically tries to separate out the utilized space that the district uses in relation to the rest of the space in the property.
It'll be between 2,500 and 3,000,
Okay, that's what I wanted to
Okay,
know.
so we've estimated the amount per year?
based off the tax records right now of property viewer.
Yep.
So I'm just knowing the building size.
Yeah.
Footprint, what we're at, what we
Yep.
occupy.
It's
It's
been the
like
highest.
43% or something, we don't.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's our share then, or we would keep 2,500 roughly, or is that the
Correct, 'cause
total?
when we get back, I mean.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
All right, that helps.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, that answers my
Yep,
question. That's-
everything helps. Yeah,
Everything.
perfect. Thank you.
Scott, I have one question for you, and that's the date that the new lease, since our current lease, it's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up. Our current lease ends in December. So will our new lease start then January 1st of 25?
Yes. Yep. So
Okay.
the current lease that you're on will sunset in December, and then this one replaces it and becomes the official document moving forward.
All right, very good.
Good, thank you.
Yep.
Anything else? We have to vote on this or not? Anything?
Yeah, we have to vote on it. I'll make the motion to accept the lease as presented with the corrections brought forward by our attorney,
Thank you, manager.
and that our administrator sign as he recommends, so that we can do an electronic signature.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you, Manager Baki. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, seeing no hands, we'll ask Tori to do the roll call vote.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye, so motion carries. Okay, thank you all. Nice to get that resolved.
Yeah, it really is. And thanks, Scott, for your help getting this to move along as you did. So thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Nice meeting you,
No, thank you
Scott.
guys very much.
Well,
Hey,
we're
nice
not
meeting
done.
you guys too. We're not done, right? We have just one other quick discussion point.
Yes, yes, we do. I was just gonna bring that up. I want to thank you for your work on the lease. And now we would like to have you explain to the board what we talked about in our building committee, our building work group. And that is the potential of having a long-term lease with an owner who will purchase the property, will build to our specifications, the location, obviously that we desire, and then also a building to meet our needs. And I presented that concept to the board a few months ago, and everybody's very interested in it. And we'd like you to talk about it more from your expert real estate background. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, sounds good. Thank you very much, Manager Anderson. And yes, we actually started speaking about this kind of last year when the district was, maybe in a growth pattern, maybe not, just in shifting in trajectory. So what we can do is, as we continue through the space in 44 Lake Building, the landlords there, and we have many clients that they just love to own real estate. They have lots of capital and they don't necessarily desire occupying it, but they would do what we call build to suit projects. So what we do is that, you guys get together, and as over the next year or so, you figure out, here's what we would really like in a space that would be perfect. Like, for example, a warehouse that you could have 1 or 2 drive-in doors, bring in some watercraft, maybe a couple of motor vehicles, have it heated with a floor drain, and keep things kind of in one spot with, the right sized offices and task rooms and conference rooms and boardrooms, if you'd like, just however you would envision it being. However, what we would do then is say, okay, here's your building. What size of land would we need that's in the district zone? Where can we get a good deal on the land? And then I have several investors that we have, the capital money players would say, okay, we'll come in and do a build to suit for you. We're going to build you this building. They would likely want about a 20-year lease that would be, mutually agreeable and negotiated out. And they would have it build to suit, and then you would occupy it as a tenant for that lease. And then it would, you go from there. And we would continually, start looking if we wanted, and maybe a retrofit of an existing building works where someone's selling, you're not necessarily a buyer, but I'll bring the buyer in. At that point, maybe we could go to a 10-year lease because the financial risk is different than a fresh build, and just find out where everything makes sense and bring the capital investment to the real estate piece for the district so you guys can focus on what you're doing and just have a nice leasehold interest in a space that totally fits what you're looking to do perfectly.
It just sounds too unbelievably simple when you talk about it, but it's true. I mean, it really is. It's just, the only thing we would have to do is obviously meet with an architect and design the type of building that we would want. And the location, obviously, would be important. So yeah, so we have input on that side of it, but none of the hassle of doing the, continuous meetings on all of that. I did talk to Mike about this. I think Chuck, we might have had a passing kind of conversation on it, but is there anything that you can add on the legal side? Are there any impediments on the legal side to doing this type of transaction? See there?
Strictly from the standpoint of the district's legal authority, I believe that this would be a viable path. With respect to the details from a conceptual point of view, there's a lot to speak for it, it seems to me there's also a fair amount of care that needs to be taken in the drafting of the arrangements, since each party would be making a pretty substantial investment in an ultimate future outcome that isn't yet there. I'm not a real estate attorney, so I haven't myself been involved in a process like it, but I can envision it, and it makes a lot of sense to me. It's just a matter of details.
Yes, and I totally agree with you on that. That's absolutely correct. A lot of detail work with the real estate attorneys, that obviously then the developer would have their attorneys, but everybody then would get together and you would have to put together a lot of time creating the right path and structure and make sure that the deal legally and practically works for everybody. Yes.
President Schmaltz?
Yeah, yes, Manager Bach, I was gonna ask if there are any questions, but go ahead.
What's appealing about this option is that we are entering into a strategic planning process, whereas managers and staff and administrator, we can sit down and agree on what we need in an office space. And so the timing on this would really be good as an organization and designing a space that would work for us.
Right, and one thing I can mention, I was a part of it's a different product, but it was downtown Stillwater where this new Miller Hotel or Miller apartment building came in, and I learned a lot there when they did that. And what you can do is you get together and, like I said, strategize and get what you need, and it'll kind of get you what they call a density footprint, like something like, it'll get you to like whatever 7,000 square feet or 8,000 square feet or whatever that may be. And then if we just take that and make it into some sort of a box or a rectangle or a square or whatever shape we want, and try to fit it to a piece of land, it'll get us to the land size that we're going to be looking for that product, for that building. So then we can start finding the land and start trying to find options that we can get to match up with the density of the building that you would be needing.
It's good. Sounds good.
Any other comments or questions? It opens up a new avenue for us, which is good. So I think, and as Manager Baki mentioned, we'll be able to discuss this in our planning process coming up too, which will be good.
Yeah.
Perfect, fantastic. Well, again, if you have any questions as you're going through that process, I'd be happy to come in and chat with you, attend any meetings and try to provide whatever resources and advice I can throughout that process. I'm more than happy to do that.
Wonderful.
Good. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks, Scott.
Hey, thank you very much. Have a great evening, all.
Yeah. Good night. Okay, moving on then to old business, state of the watershed update.
First President Managers, we had Adam here this evening. Take it away.
Adam, give me just a second. I'm pulling up your requested document.
All right, perfect, thank you. Excellent. So just a quick update, RSVPs, I think we're doing wonderful. We have 92 RSVPs in so far. I talked to the venue today and we're shooting for 110 for food just to be on the safe side. We did have several RSVPs come in today and I expect a few more. Plus we'll allow for a few folks to for walk-ins. You can see the day of, that's up on the screen right now. 4 to 4:45 is our setup. We're gonna have display tables from our district, our watershed. We'll have the management or the lake districts. We'll have an informational table on that. And then some of the partners will also have tables. 5 to 5:30, we've got a social half hour, some munchies, some mingling, and a cash bar. And then 5:30 to 6:30 is the presentations. We're working on presentations, some details on those probably tomorrow and early into next week. But the game plan is welcome and introductions is President Schmaltz, history and background, Manager Anderson. And then Mike and Blaine will be doing the bulk of the presentation, kind of programs, projects, progress, where we are, how we got there, kind of the once over. And then Justin Hansen from Bowser will be speaking, kind of acknowledging our 25th anniversary accomplishment. And then we have the buffet dinner. And then after that, we have our Watershed Champion Awards. And Mike and President Schmalz will be doing those, working on the details on that a little bit. But you can see the folks that have been nominated and they will be getting the awards. We have 5 kind of entities. They've all been notified, waiting on one to confirm that they can be there. And then a kind of a wrap up thank you from Mike. And then 8 o'clock, we're tearing down and out of there. So it's been well published. I think we've had several great articles, press releases in Chisago and Forest Lake. Partners have been sharing it online. We've certainly done our due diligence, I think, sharing it on social media, things like that. Yeah, I guess questions. Otherwise, I think we're looking good. We're on track. We got I think we have a great number of RSVPs in already.
What was that total RSVP number?
We're at 92, Manager Anderson, as of this morning.
That's fantastic. Do you have a breakdown, Adam, of how many are dignitaries, if you will, and how many are just, people that live in the district, taxpayers?
Offhand, I can pull it up really quick. Otherwise, I can send out the RSVP list to the whole board. Today. I would say, we have a pretty good chunk of staff and board that are there. Partners, county commissioners, dignitaries, folks like that, I would say are about 1/3, and 1/3 are general public.
2/3 is general public?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's really fantastic.
Adam, by the way, Leif Erickson dropped me a note and he is coming. He's on city council. I don't know whether we missed him the first time around, but he said he's coming for sure. So you want to add him to the list. He's on the city council and he's our city council representative to the watershed board. So.
Yep, he was one of several that I added today. So I did get him down, Manager.
Good. Okay, great. Any other comments or questions? Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Well done.
Yep. Getting to be exciting, so can't wait. Moving on then, we've got roles and the authorities on the flow and channels or the ditch program, so to speak. Council Holtman, you want to take us through your attachment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, happy to do so, managers. This arose from last meeting where there was a gentleman who came to the meeting to talk to the board about some flow issues in a ditch that crossed his property. The board asked that I provide a bit of a primer about flows in ditches and what's the district's role, and in general, how is it that flow is maintained in those types of conveyances. So I prepared a 2-page memo that's in the packet that hopefully lays things out. There isn't too much complication in the matter, but I'll just take a few minutes to speak to the topic and then leave it for discussion of whatever interests you. The chief category to address at the start is the category of public drainage systems, which is a specific term for drainage systems that were built under the drainage code, which is a specific Minnesota statute that's very extensive, and it provides a procedure for constructing drainage and maintaining that drainage. And that law was first enacted in 1883, and it's still in use. I read that there is approximately 19,000 miles of drainage in the public drainage system of systems constructed under the drainage code. That includes dug ditches, modifications of natural streams, and underground tile, clay, or now plastic throughout the state. And mostly, obviously, it's out of state in the agricultural regions. There's plenty of drainage in the metro area. One of our clients is Rice Creek, and they have 120 miles of drainage systems, and it's a big part of their program. Every drainage system has a public body that has a responsibility to maintain that system. There's a responsibility to inspect it and then to consider necessary repair on its own or as a result of a petition from interested parties. There is only one public drainage system within the district, and that is Washington Judicial Ditch 6. And as you know, a few years ago, the district assumed the responsibility to be the drainage authority for that system south of Forest Lake. It's the district assumed it as a system that it doesn't drain a lot of land that's in cultivation or developed land. And so the condition of it, to my rough understanding, is it's not operating at its peak drainage efficiency, but there isn't a real demand for it to do so. But but again, the district is required to inspect it at least every 5 years. And if any landowner comes to the district and says, I have water issues on my land and that drainage system is supposed to be helping me and it's not, then the district would have an obligation to investigate, and the engineer would come to you and lay it out, and you'd have to look at it. And that would be true for its general conditions, sediment in the ditch, as well as if there were a beaver dam or a fallen tree or any other specific reason for a blockage. Aside from that, it's the district, the only other district obligation to maintain flow in a ditch would be in any conveyances that are part of a district project. And staff would speak to that, of course, more precisely than I would. But if there are conveyances that the district maintains or projects that the district maintains in conveyance systems, then it also would have an obligation to make sure that it's managing those so that they are not impeding flow and causing issues to property up gradient. Otherwise, it's all a matter of property law and property rights. If you're a public body and you maintain conveyances on your land or in your right of way, or as a city maintaining your storm sewer system, then you have an obligation to maintain that in proper repair so that you're not damaging upstream property. If that channel is blocked by some act of nature, then you don't necessarily have a responsibility to take care of that, but you probably want to anyway, because it's your public mandate in general, and because it's easier than getting into arguments or lawsuits with people. If you're just a private landowner and you have a ditch running across your property, it's kind of the same thing. If if it crosses from upstream and it comes across your property, and you're doing some work on your property and you end up pushing a bunch of dirt into the ditch and it floods upstream, you know, you're gonna be liable. So you need to use your property in a way that doesn't cause that. The gentleman that was here, it's, from what I could tell, I couldn't hear very well, but it seemed like it was an issue where there was a blockage on his neighbor's property downstream. That isn't an issue that involves the district. That's an issue of, did his neighbor do something to create that blockage? And if so, he has an obligation to address that. But if it's just, you know, there's a storm and it blew a healthy tree over into the ditch, strictly speaking, nobody's liable for that. And that's between the landowners to get it removed somehow and decide how they're gonna, you know, pay for that. The last category is just natural streams. And except for the big rivers, of which there aren't any of these in the district, a bed of a stream is owned by whoever owns the land that it crosses. So it's pretty much the same as a channel. If you do something to fill it in, then you're potentially responsible. But if a tree falls, if a beaver builds a dam, that's just an act of nature, and nobody's really responsible for that. So that's my overview. I hope that makes some sense conceptually and isn't confusing. But I'm happy to have a conversation if there's matters of specific interest.
Say on a natural stream, Chuck, you say it's owned by the landowner where the water flows through their land. Is the water itself though public area? So if I have my waders on, I can walk up a stream even though it's on private land? Is that, I mean, that's the way it is with, for example, ocean property or lake properties. As long as you stay within below the, you know, normal high water of the level, it's public area as long as you can get to it. Any comments on that?
Yeah, yes. And in the field of water law, you get into some funny things because you have doctrines from the 11th century England sort of in tension with modern statutes. The general concept is that if you can float on a water body, there's a public right of use to that surface. But the bed, again, unless it's a substantial river, the bed is privately owned. So that the actual technical rule is that, yes, you can float down it, but you can't get out of your boat. Because you can't, if you put your feet on the bed, you're trespassing.
Interesting.
And what is the Sunrise River designated as?
That would fall in this category. That's private, the bed is privately owned, and and the waters, I don't have the on the ground knowledge to speak to it, but if the waters are, you know, are substantial enough to flow with regularity and able to, and you know, can float a vessel, then there's the public right to do that.
But Chuck, on the other hand, for example, when you're down trout fishing in outside of Rochester, and you have every right to fish the trout streams. I mean, if it's public land, you can walk across and get into the stream and walk up and down the stream, even if you're crossing into private land. If you stay within the stream, you're authorized to do that, as I understand it.
If the stream is within public land, then such that the bed is part of that public land ownership, then yes. But if not, it may be a practice But technically it's a trespass.
Wow.
Again, as
okay.
I've said, there are odd collisions of doctrines, and there are things that occur because they make sense and it's practice, but the law can be obscure about it.
One other question that's probably a little bit more practical here is on public drainage systems. You said it's responsibility of us to manage the drain, WJD6. Who pays for that though, if we have to do some work? Is that billed back to the person that gets the benefit of the ditch?
The formal structure is that when the ditch was constructed, it was built through special assessments. Appraisers determined the benefits for each parcel. They defined the universe of parcels benefited by the ditch system, and they determined the benefits that each individual parcel gained. And the cost of the system was assessed in proportion to those benefits. And that allocation of benefits continues to be used whenever there is work done on the system to maintain or repair it. The cost is assessed in the same proportion, though that there are procedures to adjust that allocation over time based on changes in property values. Now the complication is that that benefits roll for older systems like WJD6 have been lost, or they're just very much out of date and it's an expensive process to redo them. If you're just spending $15,000 to do some work on the ditch, you don't want to spend 5 times that amount reconstructing the benefits roll. So the statutes now provide for other mechanisms to pay for repair, where you can do it more like a stormwater charge as opposed to a special property assessment. Or the district can, the board can make certain judgments to use ordinary property tax levies to pay for that work if it has a general benefit. So we're sort of, we'd be waiting. So far, you haven't done anything on WJD6, and you may never do anything. But if that becomes an issue, then there's a couple of different funding options that we would review with you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I have one on the Sunrise River. You're stating that we don't have any of the substantial river systems in our district. But what about the Sunrise River? I mean, it's coming in from Anoka County, really, and that's what Mansmith, I think, was alluding to on his side, and it comes in, to our wetland systems in our district, and then becomes a river again, exiting Forest Lake. And when the ditch system, ditch 1, as you mentioned, was abandoned by the legislature, the Sunrise River was turned over to the DNR as a natural river system. So how do we not have that designation for the Sunrise?
Manager Anderson, this invokes another obscure element of doctrine. You're familiar with the designation of public waters.
Mhm.
That designation, it doesn't have to do with who owns the bed. That's just a term that is used to define the universe of water bodies that the DNR has regulatory authority over. And it defines it defines, well, not just major water bodies, it defines water bodies that are more than trivial. But that's for regulatory purposes. the question of who owns the bed is, that the answer to that is, water bodies that are classified as quote unquote navigable. The bed is owned by the public, but the law for when a water body fits the definition of navigable is whether it was navigable as of statehood in 1858. And that's because the public ownership exists because it adhered in the water body when it was when the water body was transferred from the federal government to the state, and before that from the British Crown to the United States. Again, very obscure. But the bottom line is that whether the bed of a river or stream is publicly owned depends on whether it was navigable in 1858. And the answer to that is nobody knows until it's an issue in a case and a judge decides it. But in the meantime, the DNR is unofficially the authoritative source. And the DNR has been very conservative about it. As one example, for Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, it became relevant and we engaged the DNR. And there's a substantial documented history of navigation on Minnehaha Creek at the time of statehood in conjunction with the mills that were located on the creek and so forth. And the DNR still holds that Minnehaha Creek is not navigable by that definition, and therefore the bed is not publicly owned. And so again, as you know, as I said, I don't have an intimate knowledge of the Sunrise, but I think of it in the same class. And all I'm saying is that I wouldn't expect the DNR considers it to fall in that class at this time.
And did I answer your question?
No, not totally, but I'm not gonna waste time
Okay.
talking about it now. I can
Right.
address that later.
Any other comments or questions for Council Holtman? Hey, thank you very much. It was interesting and a fairly in-depth subject when you think about it. I think it's not as simple as you initially made it out to be. But anyway, very interesting. Thank you. I think we all have a better understanding of what we're getting into here, so that's good. Thank you.
The bottom line on this though, the trigger was the Mr. Mansmith coming in and
Right.
asking for assistance, assuming that we had something to do with it. And so what I'm interpreting here is that the district doesn't have anything to do with it. There is something in our rule that Chuck brought up in his memo to us, though, that does seem to give us some leeway to take action. And I'd like to, maybe as a last thing, if Chuck can just tell us what action or what authority does that rule that you mentioned give us to act in the situation like Mr. Mansmith?
Sure, that's.
Yeah, to say it real concisely, the district has an obligation, a legal obligation, or may have one with respect to WJD6 or in any conveyance that's part of a district project or facility. The district would have regulatory authority to regulate an action pursuant to the paragraph that I cited in my memo in the floodplain rule, that you have to read through the rule. It's not likely really to apply to an obstruction in a channel. It's more if somebody is trying to change the course of a channel or otherwise do grading that changes flow. And then finally, the district always, almost always does have the authority, if it chooses, to take actions with respect to an obstruction or a blockage. If you have the permission of the landowner. And you would do that, you know, if you found that there was a public benefit as opposed to just a purely private benefit to taking out a beaver dam or removing a tree or whatever it might be, you do have the authority to do that.
Or removing obstructions, changes in lands. Yeah,
Yes.
and correcting those things that are impeding that water from flowing.
Yes.
And what if they're adding more water to the system? Through a ditch situation like this? Because that's what I heard him saying, is that there had been housing built, you know, I think to the, would be the east of him, west of him. And that it was overtaxing the existing drainage system.
You have your rules. And if your rules aren't sufficient to prevent that type of impact, then you can revise your rules to try to address that.
Well, it's applying that rule to private systems. I guess that's what I'm saying. So when there's a impact to the overall system within the district and it's having an impact on other property owners, then the district can work on that, correct?
Yeah, again, if it's triggered by your rules. So if there's development and hard surface that that accelerates flow into a ditch, your rules will regulate that because the rules regulate land development. But if an upstream landowner just goes out and redirects flows on his own property in a way that puts more water on somebody's land downstream, that's not something that your rules presently address, and that's just a dispute between those two landowners. In theory, you could regulate those types of things if you found it important to do so, but you'd have to go through a rulemaking.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, if not, we'll move on then to program project updates, starting with project update A.
Mr. President, managers. Not sure, let's see, just making sure planning wasn't on. So you've had the, slides there. I know there was a question, I think at the last or August board meeting at some point about, signs at the North Shore Trail nature area. Turned out staff was in the process of acquiring those and they're installed. So, I think there's also, we're progressing, with our other two main projects. That's the GD6. We're getting close to close out there. Both just some vegetation components and both of those we should be seeing some, maybe some pay applications coming forth here fairly soon on those. The Little Comforts, Lakes and Watershed Enhancement Project, this is Heath Avenue, Iron Ants and Filter Project is moving forward. The district had, well, a couple of things. We received last spring a grant through the Lower St. Croix for project feasibility, to cover the majority of it. There's be some match for the district. We have a purchase agreement that's contingent on the district receiving the grant dollars. So which we will know by December. We'll execute the grant sometime typically in March. And then we proceed with that. We'll also go through a process of having the property rezoned. Currently it's 5 acres under ag, and the city of Wyoming required that it be designated residential and split. So, but so far we're moving along, the plan designs are getting close. And we would look to probably order the project. It's typically after we'll know that we have the funding, and that would be Bowser's December board meeting.
Okay. Any questions for Mike? Okay, not hearing none, then we'll move on to program update, the shoreline inventory that's been done. Look kind of interesting.
Yeah, Aiden was there, so thank you, Aiden. Proceed.
All right, thank you. Mr. President, managers, I have a presentation today outlining our 2024 shoreline inventory. So you should be viewing a screen with the 2024 shoreline inventory slide up there. All right, so I'm going to skip over some of the methodology sections here because they're similar to last year, but I will just give a brief highlight on that. We're going to kind of go straight into the meat and potatoes of this presentation. So, as a reminder, the shoreline inventory is something that's called for in our 10-year watershed management plan. You know, apart from just being called for, it allows us to create a baseline of data. So last year we did Bone, Comfort, and Forest. This year we did Moody, Birch, School, and Shields. And so just getting that baseline data that we can use to measure where we're at in terms of our shoreline goals. As a reminder, those goals are that we should have 75% of lakeshore parcels with 75% natural shoreline condition. And functionally, what that looks like for us in doing these surveys is we do these surveys at a regular 100-foot interval. So we interpret this as 75% of data points should have 75% natural shoreline condition. Functionally, it's difficult to measure parcel size when you're out on a boat in the lake. So this works out a little bit easier for us. So we use Score the Shore. I'm happy to answer questions about this methodology, but I've discussed this before. The big reason for using it is that it captures the data points we're looking for, as well as a bunch of other ones. And then it's also a standard metric that we can share. Say the DNR does a survey, you know, on Clear Lake. Well, we can actually make comparisons between the Clear Lake and our lakes now because we're all using the same data, more or less. As a reminder, these are kind of the scores we're talking about. High, moderate, low, very low. Functionally, we do not see high ratings on lakes. We might see a high shoreline rating or a high shore land rating, but we don't see lakes ranked highly. That's just, the max score right now is 82. So just to give you a sense of where things are at. So again, Score the Shore, the methodology we use, district goals, natural shoreline condition, just one component of Score the Shore. So what did we find? So we had our 4 lakes surveyed this year. These are 4 of our smaller lakes, and we kind of expected a better shoreline condition in these ones just because they're less developed. And we did find all 4 of these lakes did have a moderate lake-wide score, which was good. Especially we'll delve in specifically to our district goal metric, which is natural shoreline condition. You can see all these lakes have a really nice shoreline score. Interestingly, School Lake took the cake this year with the highest total lake score, narrowly edging out Moody Lake. So Moody Lake, not much to say about it other than it scored well. We have 98% natural shoreline cover in Moody compared to a goal of 75, which is excellent. This is an image of one of the residential properties on Moody Lake. And you can hardly tell, which is exactly what we like to see. There is a house back there, but we can't see it. Exactly what we like to see. So natural vegetation, 98%. We were far in excess of our 75%, which is great. Depending on how well you can see this map, basically the only spot that we're missing is the boat launch, which, you know, we're never going to score 100% if we are facilitating some type of use like that. So we can certainly make improvements, but 98% is pretty good. Looking more deeply into the shoreline characteristics, we do find some other information that is interesting, which is we have great shoreline natural cover, but we had a lot of points that lacked what we call overhead woody habitat. These are those overhanging branches and kind of creating more of a complex matrix between the land and the shoreline. That's really important for fish habitat. Those overhanging branches fall and become basking logs or fish sticks. So we didn't have a whole lot of overhead woody habitat. And so this also demonstrates one of the, not necessarily flaw, but one of the features of the Score the Shore, which is when we have areas that are really dominated by open wetland and not necessarily forested wetland, we may not be seeing those large, we might see some discrepancies there in the amount of overhead woody habitat. But it's a good reminder that forested wetland is a declining ecotype. And so potentially a direction to restore or to send some restoration efforts in the future would be to add more trees in these shoreland and shoreline areas. Here's a little bump out of the shoreline trees, shrubs, or wetlands. So again, really well covered, but that city park area, the boat launch, not quite where we would like to see it. And then land use, predominant land use is undeveloped wetland. Second would be single family residential, and then you can kind of see that broken out further down. So again, less developed lakes are going to have a little bit easier time meeting our goals. And so Moody Lake is doing well, but certainly room for improvement. Shields Lake, similar. We were at 92% natural shoreline cover. So again, scored moderate overall, smaller lake, less developed, but certainly meeting our goals. Another nice example of a residential shoreline. You can see the house back there in this one, but really a nice example of a way that shoreline can be maintained in pretty much a natural state while still maintaining use of what is a small water body, but it had a dock and we did see some fishing boats out there when we were out there. So almost 100%. Again, we've got a boat launch, a fishing pier in this case, and some kind of impervious shoreline area by the golf course, which I think they probably have minimized their shoreline impact as much as the golf course can. So Shields Lake is doing really well, meets and exceeds our goals. And again, we see that same note where we are missing overhead woody habitat in a lot of this lake shore. And this Shields also scored less well in terms of the trees and shrubs. So part of that, again, is that certain types of wetland won't have as much woody habitat, but also the park and the golf course land uses, meant that there weren't going to be as many trees and shrubs in those areas. And again, land use. Undeveloped wetland is the largest, technically tied with other commercial, which in that case, that's the golf course. They own quite a bit of shoreline and have minimized their impact quite a bit on that. A lot of that shoreline is maintained in a natural condition. A lot of undeveloped shoreline. So Shields Lake meets our goals, always room for improvement, like I said, especially near that golf course area. Birch Lake, another lake that did well. Our first 100%er, our survey showed that all of the data points had at least 75% natural shoreline cover. So that's excellent news. And again, overall, the lake scored as a moderate. So I did put in a map there. You can see all those spots are blue, so Birch Lake is doing great. And another example of a residential developed lot with full natural cover. And again, Birch Lake is awful shallow, so they're not necessarily going to have large docks out there, but for the most part, the landowners on this lake have maintained their properties in a way that's really, really good for the lake. But again, looking at that shoreline characteristics, not a lot of overhead woody habitat. Now, Birch Lake has a lot of wetland areas, and a lot of those wetlands are not forested. And so that's where we're going to see not a whole lot of opportunity for overhead woody habitat. And then land use, mostly undeveloped wetland. Undeveloped other would be upland, and then just a small slice of single family residential. So Birch Lake, like the others, doing great. Birch Lake in particular, we did see a lot of those wetland areas with dead or dying ash trees. And so that would be potentially an area that, you know, if we were interested in some reforestation efforts, those wetlands would be something to consider in the future. And last but not least is school. So another good scoring moderate lake, 96% natural shoreline cover, exceeding our goals. Another residential property that's, you know, school lake's a little bit larger than the others we've looked at, can facilitate a little bit more recreational use, but we still saw some very quality residential lots that met and exceeded our goals. So almost, you know, so close to 100%. Those dots pretty much are single family homes where they are, you know, do have some more intensive shoreline use. And then again, that overhead woody characteristic that we're looking at. So definitely something we want to be facilitating in the future. There's that mark of where those trees are or are not. So really nice cover, but especially in those more developed areas, we start seeing those trees being taken down. And they're not as prevalent. And then again, undeveloped wetland is a large portion, and then only 31% single family home. So not quite the same challenges as Comfort, Forest, and Bone, but these lakes are certainly meeting our goals now, which is great. Always trees and shrubs. That's going to be my mantra for the next year, I think, on these shorelines. And so what do we do with this information? Well, we do have another shoreline inventory scheduled for next year, and that'll be topping off Keewatin and Little Comfort. So we'll have a complete collection then of this round of data collection. And with all this information, we will use it to adapt and target our shorelines. So apart from getting that baseline data, we also have a photographic record now of these shorelines. So in the case that we do have a permitting violation or some sort of shoreline problem, we do have this information now that we can reference. And now I could have guessed, but now we know that Moody Lake, Birch Lake, School Lake, and Shields Lake all exceed our goals, which is fantastic. Those residents will remain eligible for our cost share. If they have shoreline projects that they're interested in, we would love to help them out. But generally, we're not targeting resources in those areas now. You can see here the comparison of the lake. You'll see that Little Comfort at last point it was surveyed did meet our goals already. So it'll be really interesting to see that data next year and make sure that they have maintained or even improved that metric. And I pointed out some of the expected and unexpected here. Less development is going to make this a little easier for everybody. So that was expected. The unexpected note would definitely be that note on the overhead woody habitat. We kind of think of that as a really important factor, especially in preventing ice heaves on forest and our larger lakes. And so seeing that not present as often is kind of an interesting thing to note. And that's our quick and easy shoreline inventory presentation. Any questions from folks?
I'd just like to make a comment. We're dealing with lakes that are not general lakes. They are, a lot of them, wetlands, basically, marshes sometimes. So the expectation to have as much tree cover, I think is dependent upon that ecosystem. And even the shrubs and so forth, if it's a wetland at a certain category, you don't see that type of woody material in those wetlands. So what I would find helpful, and I think others would too, is including, we don't know a lot about these lakes, first of all, those were the last things on the list to get to once the major lakes are taken care of, the major basins, but it would really help to get the DNR classification for each of these whenever you're talking about this and, or presenting material. What does the DNR classify them as? And then if it's a wetland, what type of a wetland is it? There's, I think it's 5 different ratings for wetlands. And so the expectation to see, the woody material, as you said, shrubs or trees, wouldn't be expected in some of those classifications. So that would be extremely helpful. for me to always have that reference, so that you're not thinking about this lake being something that it could never be.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, you know, as a scientist, you know, we have to be consistent in our methods. And so long as we are consistent, we can make that comparison. But I think, you know, what this is demonstrating is that that metric is very important for certain types of fish habitat, but it's not something that we necessarily need to be judging the overall quality of a lake's shoreline on. And I'll note that our natural shoreline, excuse me, the shoreline trees metric, the way we describe that is shoreline trees, shrubs, or wetland. And so we've already admitted that wetland will not necessarily have trees when we look at that metric, but that overhanging woody habitat piece does stick in there. So I think you're right that looking at the types of wetlands will make that comparison a little bit more informative.
Okay, and then one last thing is the amount of cattails. We don't know if we're dealing with natives or the hybrid, I think, cattails. So I don't know what difference that makes, but maybe that would be important information that could be designated. I know that when the phosphorus levels in Comfort Lake were larger in the 60 range, before the district started, we had a lot more depth of the cattails. But as the phosphorus improved, in other words, went down, you know, to 30 and below, the cattails weren't quite as abundant as before. So is there an expectation that as we resolve the phosphorus issues that we're going to see fewer cattails?
Yeah, it's the direction we can go in terms of assessing the actual vegetation types we're looking at. Right now, we're just looking at, is there something green growing there? Is there something not green growing there? You know, if it's obviously a manicured garden, you know, we're not counting that as natural shoreline cover. But the way we do the survey is cattails are as good as, you know, something more, you know, as bulrushes or something we would prefer there. But yeah, that's certainly something that we could, you know, consider in the future, you know, trying to draw some correlations with.
Yeah, but there are different expectations for different types of water bodies, I guess is the whole point of it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Aiden? Aiden, I did have one question. Where can you find lake scores for other lakes like White Bear Lake? Are they purchased or are they published on the DNR website, or where can we find those?
Yeah, I don't know how well publicized they are. I access them, so they're available through we have kind of what we call the shared, you know, Minnesota Geospatial Commons, where a lot of agencies will upload their GIS data. And so it's publicly available in that respect, and then I can go in and download those files. But they're not readily available to the everyday user who doesn't have GIS software. They may be available in Excel format, but I can certainly pull that out and make it available to the board. But I do not know that the DNR, you know, I would guess that the DNR publishes these on a lake by lake basis to interested parties. They may not be publishing a big document each year with the latest Score the Shore results.
Well, I think that one article we read said there was 853 or 836 lakes scored, and they implied that like Forest Lake was in that list, and then you could look up the other people in the list, but it didn't tell you how to look them up. I would be interested in seeing what, you know, because just like Forest Lake is different than a wetland lake, how about other lakes like Forest Lake, city lakes, what I would call them, like Bald Eagle, White Bear, and Big Marine would be three that would be, you know, big important lakes that are nearby. How do they compare to Forest Lake? I'd be really interested in knowing that, if that's possible to find out.
Yeah, I did just take a quick Google search, and the only space I see it available is in that Geospatial Commons. And so what I can do is make this information available to the board as an Excel file in a spreadsheet format. That would be the quickest way to look at that data.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? I find it very interesting. It's It's amazing how different the lakes are, but again, a lot of that has to do with the type of lake it is. Based upon Manager Anderson's observations and the fact that, you know, like half the lake is wetland on the shoreline is a big factor to consider, so. Okay, good. Anything else? If not, we would need a summary of an approval of board direction. Council Holman, did we have any follow-up things to do tonight?
Mr. Chair, staff will write up and distribute to the managers. The managers discussed rationales for not signing up for the MREP contract. The staff will, as appropriate, include reference to the DNR classification of water bodies and wetlands of the various lakes that are the subject of presentations. And then Mr. Reed will make available to the board an Excel file with the information from the geospatial commons on lakeshore conditions.
Okay, thank you. Anything we missed here from the board? Okay, any other comments or questions before we adjourn? I'd just like to take a minute and welcome Emily back. I think Emily's on the line here. She's been gone for a nice vacation, so it's good to have you back, Emily. We don't have to
Hi,
retrain
thank
you, do we? Good to have you back. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll
second that motion and Tori, if you could please do the roll call vote.
Manager Lowe. Still
No.
on. Okay, Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Schmaltz.
Aye. Motion carries, we're adjourned. Thank you all for a good meeting.
You.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.